I have already announced from Zimbabwe, he is here. Then we go to the next speaker from...
He's here.
After him, Comrade Ukraine, from Ukraine, Paulo Vagan, he will be the next speaker from Ukraine.
The WFTU General Secretary, Mr. George Mabikovis, COSATU President, leaders of trade unions here present, delegates, observers, comrades and friends. As a Zimbabwe, I would like to welcome you all to our SADC region. By doing that, I am trying to tell you that we are co-hosting you together with our sister country, South Africa, because we come from the SADC region. Zimbabwe, as it welcomes you, wants also to tell you that it is in this SADC region, which is a hub of the liberation struggles against capitalism, which were led by our nationalist leaders and revolutionary political parties throughout SADC, which include leaders like Samora Machel, Robert Mugabe, Nelson Mandela, Chris Hani, Moses Madiba, among others. For Zimbabwe, trade unionism started here in South Africa and spread to Zimbabwe through the works of migrant workers like Clemens Kadali from Malawi, who influenced Zimbabwean trade unionism like Benjamin Burombo. From the 1920s to 1950, the trade unions were trying to use minimum methods to free workers and the masses from the capitalist yoke without success. As a result of their struggle, brutality was unleashed against them by the colonial regime of Ian Smith, which forced them to transform trade unions into militant political parties to prepare them to wage a liberation struggle. Zimbabwe got independence in 1980 after a Robert Mugabe-led, Joshua Mugabe-led socialist armed struggle called Chimurenga II. The defeated capitalists did not vanish with the attainment of independence, but they have transformed neo-colonial tactics into neo-colonial tactics, which are with us today. The true colors and tactics of the imperialists must be imparted to our young generation. We need to urgently counter this capitalist offensive and diehardness of unchanging neo-colonial interests. In Zimbabwe, President Mugabe is loved for his fast-track land reform and his indigenization and economic empowerment policies, which have democratized resource ownership and targets to benefit the workers and the peasants alike. This is why Mugabe's age is not an issue to us in Zimbabwe. What matters is what he delivers to the people in a socialist path that fulfills the objectives of the blood and liberation struggle. It was for this reason that Zimbabwe was punished by way of economic sanctions imposed by the great hypocrites of the world, USA, Britain, and the capitalist Europe. The sanctions have caused company closures, salary and job cuts, retrenchments, underproduction in farms, inaccessibility to social services, and general suffering of the populace. We cannot blame President Mugabe's age for these sanctions-induced hardships because these are tactics of the capitalists. They want to divert our attention from the main issue. They are the causes, and we cannot forgive them for that. We endured the grim horrors of the liberation struggle as we are doing to the effects of the sanctions as workers of Zimbabwe. We are going through the painful phase of an economic war. We are today victims as workers, but for Zimbabwe, victory is certain, especially with your support as a World Federation of Trade Unions. With your support, we will succeed. The neo-colonial forces opted to use us as labor to use us as labor for these hardships to overthrow the government. This can only be done by those who are blinkered, who can be used. The recent wave of strikes in Zimbabwe were organized by puppets of capitalism in the name of non-governmental organizations who never strike against the imposition of sanctions. How can they blame Mugabe's age and government for the economic meltdown in Zimbabwe? As ZFTU, we are in support of President Mugabe's economic empowerment policies. Workers stand to benefit from the empowerment through the employee share ownership schemes, while rural communities will benefit from the community ownership schemes. As ZFTU, we appeal for this WFTU Congress to add its voice in condemning the crippling sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. The puppet organizations were planned to ignite demonstrations which will attract neo-colonialist attention and NATO terrorism the Libyan way, using the biased UN veto system. The Libyan crisis will give us a very good example of the tactics of the capitalists in this world. If we decide to fight as a socialist movement, we then have to be proactive. And we must use the example as we impart this information to our youth. Local non-governmental organizations in Libya were used to steer internal accusation, like the Youthland system, which was used here in South Africa in the Anglo-Boer War of 1891. They were tipped to start striking inside Libya so that United Nations will declare that Libya is a crisis country. Then they used the resolution number 3 to invade Libya without the approval of African Union, without the approval of the Arab League. It was all for its rich oil resources. It was also a movement against socialism. It was also to create contracts for American companies using war tactics. One American said the best time to make money is when blood is still on the ground of Libya. What all this means is capitalists are tracking all countries with recalcitrant leadership, known for their tenacious characters in asserting their people's rights and murdering them or influencing regime change agendas using labor in some instances. The attack on President Mugabe and Gaddafi are attacks on socialism as are perceived capitalist threats. After the 1959 Cuban Revolution, USA made it clear that it would never support or tolerate any further socialist government in the Southern Hemisphere. This was followed by overthrowing of Dominican Republic in 1965 by President Johnson and the overthrowing of Chile.
You have to finish now.
Sorry, I'm finishing. To overthrow Chile's government and also attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro of Cuba and destabilization in Nicaragua and Guatemala by CIA. So capitalist threats also create unsustainable market competition, which will result in the creation of protectionist policies like the current protectionist policy by Zimbabwe called the Statutory Instrument 64 of 2016. Because companies from foreign countries will create cheap goods which will then come to the countries.
Thank you.
One more minute. If countries with advanced technology manufacture goods, those goods will flood the markets of countries with low technologies, and it means their local countries, these industries will be eclipsed. Once they are eclipsed, it means company closures. So when we have got this statutory instrument 64 of 2016, we are saying we want to protect our industries so that people continue to be employed as workers in our country. This happened in Britain 116 years ago, when it also had protectionist policies against the wearing of calico from India, which was the best quality then, and they were saying we can strip off whoever is found on the British streets wearing an Indian cloth, which means they wanted to promote their own textile industry in Britain. So what's wrong when Zimbabwe does the same?